Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, this is another video I'm making today. This is a video I encourage you to watch and then wait for me to make a follow-up video on talking about my experiences, because this is something I have not yet experienced. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about some games that are belief-based. And so I'm going to be playing a game called The Veil, which is a game that's powered by the apocalypse, but it also is very belief-based. In checking that stuff out and discussing the beliefs with the other players that are going to be involved in the game, I was also encouraged to check out some other games that are belief-based. So I checked out, things like Burning Wheel, and came upon some really good wikis and not forums, but discussions about them. Some really good explanation of how to play belief-based games, how to formulate good beliefs, etc. There were some things I had a little bit of concern about, and I still have some concern about. I'm not saying these games are bad, but I want to give you kind of like my mindset or where I'm coming from. And I found, as I talked to other people, as I expressed my concerns and whatnot, got some feedback, and we had a very lively discussion. It kind of crystallized some of my where I think some of my reservations are. And I think it's always important to talk about your reservations, even before you try something. I mean, it's not meaning you don't try it, but you just kind of figure out what is it that I'm a little bit nervous or unsure about. And so in this case, it came down to me, surprisingly, to agency. Which is a little, it was. I smiled when I had that happen. Now, a lot of people talk about, I don't want to dwell on player agency a lot, but a lot of people, expand player agency to be something really big, like you're going to have, agency over the collaborative nature of the world, over certain parts of reality, etc. But for somebody like me, when I define player agency, what I'm really talking about is that I control everything that my character does, says, thinks, and feels. Okay, so kind of hold that in your mind for a second. Now, belief-based games, part of what they go for, as far as I understand it, is the beliefs of the characters being tested constantly. And some beliefs may be resolved, they may be changed. That's part of how one gains experience, and in some games it's part of how one gains some other in-game currencies and what have you. Now, beliefs changing naturally as a result of like being examined and tested doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I actually kind of like it. That's part of what's happening in our Lamentations of Prussia game, as the players, and certainly in the All for One Regime Diabolique game I've been involved in. There are some beliefs and some motivations or goals, but, all those kind of things that are being tested as the characters are kind of coming face to face with things that may challenge those beliefs. And some of those may stand scrutiny, and some of those may not. That doesn't bother me at all. And of course, as Anthony brought up as we were discussing stuff, there are some characters, like especially in like pulps. The pulp heroes or the pulp character, where they remain stalwart in their views no matter what. And so he kind of gave the example of like something like the Shadow. He pretty much, his beliefs are his beliefs the whole way through. And that's a very compelling thing to explore as well. However, I'm experienced or interested enough to want to experience games that are a little bit different than what I normally do, and so I'm interested in checking out these games that explore like changes in beliefs or mechanically changing beliefs or goals and motivations. But I do have some doubts about whether or not I'll like them. Now, I don't believe, as we were having this discussion, we talked about various things. I don't believe that the beliefs or motivations or goals, make up the entire persona of the character. They're just a large chunk of it. Actions, whatever actions you take that may, as a result of your beliefs, they're just tools in the toolbox. A character that believes in, solving their problems with a sword, if they run into a situation where they cannot solve their problem with a sword, they simply take another tool out of the toolbox. It doesn't really change their persona or motivations or beliefs at that point. Now, here's the sticking point for me in some kind of a belief-based game. As I said before, my preferred definition of agency, or my locus of control, my control over my character, is I control everything that my character does, says, thinks, and feels. Now, of course, when I'm creating a character, I have to adhere to whatever the genre is. In other words, if I'm making a character that's inappropriate to the genre that we've agreed to play, inappropriate to the game, that doesn't count. Okay, so just saying that, or putting that on the table, that's not okay. I have to adhere to the genre, make genre appropriate characters for the game. So in that sense, I always I already agreed to limit my agency somewhat during character generation. However, where I start to bristle a little bit is at the notion of mechanics requiring me or forcing me to change beliefs. over time, even if it's just a game mechanic, say you're going to have these beliefs tested, and part of gaining experience or whatever is that you're going to have to resolve them or change them, or whatever it is happens to be. And essentially, my gut level reaction is that's intruding a little bit on my control over what my character thinks and what my character feels, and ultimately by default, that's going to change, or intrude a little bit on my control over what my character does and says. I'm not saying that beliefs changing and being tested, I don't mind that as part of gameplay. As part of prescriptive gameplay, or that part of the expectation is your beliefs are going to change, that's where I start to get a little bit, I start to feel like, at least my gut level reaction is my agency is being intruded upon. Now, having said all that, sure, there's moments in a lot of games where characters get exposed to things where they are no longer in control of how they think or feel. Let's just take the old games I grew up with. There are games where you get gripped by fear. You get exposed to a mummy. You fail your fear save, or say you're playing Leagues of Gothic Horror and you fail your horror checks and you lose points of sanity and become more and more horrified and less in control of your character. Or say you're back and playing the games I grew up with, and somebody casts Charm Person on you, or some monster charms you, and all of a sudden you are no longer in control of what you think or feel, etc. But these I've always accepted for a couple reasons. They made sense in terms of what was actually happening in the fiction in that genre. And the second thing is, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, they were transient, and they were from powerful external causes. Whether it's the mummy, or being exposed to Cthulhu, or Yog-Sothoth, or being exposed to some the vampire that the Zaya spiral and you get charmed. Whatever it happens to be, you become beguiled. So, for me, equating those kind of states, those states where I am no longer in control of what my character thinks and feels at that moment, due to this external cause, is a lot different than, a game that requires me, through some enforced or evolving belief mechanic to kind of, change how my character thinks and feels, and maybe their goals or motivations, how they perceive the world. Now, these are all just gut level reactions. I'm going to, so I'd encourage you to, if you're interested, stay tuned. And, as I play the game like the Veil, as hopefully I get to play some other belief-based games, I'll come back to you and let you know what my experience has actually been. This is just me putting my cards on the table and talking about some of my reservations. But I found it interesting at the end of the day, as I talked to people, I discovered that I was really a little bit worried about my agency over my character, So, what do you think about all that? What has your experience been with this? If you played belief-based games, what have been your takeaways? Have you had positive experiences or negative experiences? Can you relate it all to what I'm saying? I'd like to hear about it.